everyone, this week we're doing a part of our limited time magical moss science kit. This here is a vial of lycopodium powder, which is actually the spores of club moss and some other ferns. You can think of spores as like pollen from flowers, except the moss doesn't need love to reproduce and have babies like flowers do. Moss basically clones itself, which means it grows faster, but doesn't necessarily like moving to new places. When moss clones itself, it shoots a ton of spores up into the air. These spores are really tiny and can get carried away on the wind so they don't have to share a room with a million brothers and sisters. Because they're so small, it's easy for them to fly into a lake or a river. Now that's not a good place to start growing though, so they develop this special ability that lets them float around until they land on some nice dirt or a rotten tree. This ability is called hydrophobia. Hydro means water, and phobia basically means fear. It's sort of like how some people have arachnophobia. Arachna means spiders, so people who are arachnophobic are scared of spiders. Did you know that some people have neophobia? That comes from the word neos, which means things that are new or young. So people who are neophobic are scared of new things. You can ask your parents what they think about that. So, these spores are hydrophobic, which means they don't like water and will clump together if there's water around them. So, let's test it out. Here, if I put them in a glass of water, what happens? Let's use up a good chunk of it. You can see that it sits here on top. Right? Just resting on top. Just floating. Now, check this out. If I put my finger in, what's happening? Can you see that? The moss spores are covering my finger. Then I take my finger out. Look at that. My finger is completely dry. There's not a drop of water anywhere on my finger. All right? Let's see. Do it again. Super cool. I can feel the water, as in I can feel the temperature of the water. It's colder than the moss, well, than the ambient air around us. I pull my finger out. My hand is completely dry. Now, why is that? Why does that happen? Well, wow, a little dusty. Let's try to explain. Here is what water looks like up close. It has 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, which is why it's also called H2O. Since this structure is not perfectly symmetrical, it's called a polar molecule. Sort of like how polar bears only live around the North Pole and not the South Pole. Polar just means that it has a more negative charge on one end and a more positive charge on the other end, like a magnet. So when you have a lot of water in a cup, for example, the positive ends try to stay close to the negative ends of the water around it, and vice versa. Lycopodium powder, on the other hand, is a non-polar molecule, meaning it is symmetrical and doesn't have any real difference between one side and the other. Sort of like how you're just as good and well behaved at home as you are at school, right? So when we mix the two of them together, the non-polar powder has a hard time squeezing and fitting between the polar water molecules, which want to stick close together. This squeezes all of the powder to the top, since it can't dissolve and mix with the water. When you use your finger to push the powder into the water, the non-polar molecules stick together because they won't mix with the polar water. This also works with things like vegetable oil, which is non-polar, and why companies like to try scooping up oil spills with things like these containment booms that float on top of the water and stop it from spreading out. Hopefully, this helps you understand what's going on with lycopodium powder. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe for more videos from Dan, Liza, and Amelia.